Hey, welcome in to another edition of the Blue and Gray Rice Football Preview Show. As always, I am Matthew Bartlett, Director and Managing Editor of the Roost, joined by Rice Owl's voice, JP Heath, to look ahead rather than look behind. And I don't know if I want to do too much looking behind after, another tough one. I know I said I wouldn't look too far behind, but can we just acknowledge that kind of stung last week and need a new taste in our mouths?
Yeah, and like we talk about a lot, context is so important in the way it happened. It's not just the loss, but losing in close fashion, having it right there, and lack of a better term, slipping through your fingers, and a very winnable game. So that's two in a row, really. You could say that should be on the left side of the column, and they don't get much more tougher than that. But like the boss said this week in the presser, hey, everything's still in front of them. I think Cole Garcia echoed that as well too. So they need to get into that mindset to flush that one. As difficult as it says to keep as it is to keep saying that over and over, put it behind you, learn from it. You don't want to feel like that again and build on it because, oh, buddy, the task at hand, you can't afford to be looking in the past for the Hilltoppers coming in here. They're the hottest team in the league. I mean, I guess UTSA really is, but the hottest team that you have right now on the schedule that you could possibly still play, and you can't afford to look back in the past.
Yeah, absolutely not. And I think I don't remember if it was here, if it was on a podcast or a show somewhere. I know you and I have talked somewhere in some form or fashion about Bailey Zappi and the Western Kentucky offense, that quarterback that transferred from down the road in Houston Baptist. I think when we start our conversation of what the task at hand is, it has to start with him. And it's not often that I think maybe an FBS defense is shaking in their boots when a former FCS quarterback walks into town. But I think it's safe to say Bailey Zappi is not your average FCS quarterback. How would you kind of, from what you've seen so far of Zappi, where would he kind of fit in among the quarterbacks that Rice has faced in the past couple of years?
You're really good, and I don't mind this. You're really good at asking those questions that make me ponder. And I guess we've got 27 more minutes to talk about it. I won't take that long, as some think, in my answers. But he's up
I
there.
could ask you how good is Bailey Zappi, and you would say good, but that's not as interesting content for the folks following along.
Yeah, let's rank him, and he's really up there. If you're going apples to apples, and you're talking G5 to G5, he's numero uno, I think. And you look at the Texas quarterback situation recently, you could probably say apples to pear, because a pear is kind of like an apple. They're very similar. The pear is a little sweeter, so that's kind of Zappy in this metaphor. It's not exactly an apple because I don't think Zappy plugged into a different system. He obviously doesn't put up these same numbers, but he's really, really good. And he's one of the few guys that I had seen in person, especially from an East Division team. When we were locked down in the Pandy last year, I safely went up and watched him play against North Texas. And man, and this 2020 North Texas was different than this 2021 North Texas. And for a long time, he put it on the mean green. So at that time, I didn't know that Rice would be playing him next year, but as far as system to system, I was looking back some of those old games in the box scores. Mike White, now at the Jets, in his first career start with Western Kentucky, put up those numbers. Of course, that's pre-Tyson Helton, and Zappy is up there. He's at the top of the list of the quarterbacks. That's my long way of saying yes. He ranks up there as the very top. But it's system to system, and as far as what he does with his system and being productive on this Saturday, any given Saturday, he is. And we'll talk about remedies to counter that in a little bit, I'm sure. But yeah, he is he is el numero uno as far as that goes.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned Mike White, he's a name. The other name probably in Western Kentucky lore, if there's any CUSA fans out there that harken back to the days of Brandon Doughty, uh, probably arguably the most accomplished passer in Western Kentucky history, along with Mike White. But Brandon Doughty, his best season that he put together in 2015, I thought this was pretty interesting. Threw for 3,310 yards, 30 touchdowns, and 5 INTs, which is phenomenal. And Zappy in 9 games so far, 3,742. So that's 400 more yards in 3 less games, 37 touchdowns, 7 more touchdowns, and 6 INTs. So again, we're talking apples to apples. You can't directly translate 2 different eras, and especially with the high flying offense that Western is running now, maybe a little bit more spread. But man, if you're breaking program records in the first year where you've made the jump from a lower level of college football, you're doing something wrong. Right. Sorry. You're not doing something wrong. You're doing something right. Got me double negatives, all tongue tied looking at these box scores for Bailey Zappi. And I think, for those who haven't been tracking along with Western Kentucky football, Rice fans, I won't blame you if you haven't followed them step for step, but I think it's notable that something that's kind of helped Zappi and is worth mentioning about is he made the transfer from Houston Baptist to Western Kentucky during the offseason. Along with him also came offensive coordinator and the entire Houston Baptist receiving corps. With Jareth Stearns being kind of the key cog in that. He's already at 1,200 yards and 11 touchdowns, by the way. This is guy's doing 130 yards a game, which is crazy. So made the jump, brought the entire offense with him, and has made settling in all that more easier. Can you kind of like think back? I can't remember another instance where a quarterback has like the entire offense has just switched schools. Like this seems like a once in a lifetime kind of thing. Can you recall anything close?
No, because I mean, like and I'm sure most of the audience knows, we're in this transfer portal era. We're really just beginning it. There are folks that want to, and me some days, depending on the day of the week, I want to say, "Oh, transfer portal you," but then I go, like that meme, where that woman's going, it works out sometimes too. So no, we haven't seen anything like this because we're still pretty fresh in the portal era. And he brings the OC too, not just his receivers, but that was hinted at there. But he brings his you could say his offensive coordinator brought him potato. But
I believe Helton did say that it was Zappi who came in first, and then the OC was an addition after the fact. That's the official story.
Yeah, and that's pretty appropriate with who's running
it, but that's the official story.
Yeah, I would buy that too, because I mean, he's the guy that's going to be slinging around. He's got to have a scheme mixed in there too to put up some of his numbers in context. As I have Matthew frozen screen right now. I talked to strength coach Hans Straub a few weeks ago. He got a kick out of the last time this happened where the screen was frozen. And when you're in this screen is frozen mode in this Zoom era, even though this isn't technically a Zoom, the other person on the other end doesn't know they're in screen frozen. What do you call that? Purgatory. So you have to let them catch up. Luckily, I have plenty of notes, and I'm in an audio medium or speaking medium where we can fill some of that. But Zappi, not to make this about the Bailey Zappi show. There he is. As I kick out one Matthew, and I bring in another here. There he is. There he is.
Good. I can't take the rest of the week off.
No, you can't. You've got quadruple duty with the rest of the Rice teams. I was just giving some context, and I was explaining how in this modern era of frozen screens, how you have to wait for that other person to acknowledge it. But you're a big boy, and you figured your way through. But in his last 13 games, Here's a full season's context for Zappe. 52 touchdowns in 7 picks. He's the all-time, we're going to move on, I promise, from a third of the show being dedicated to him, but he does have some interesting accolades, and we'll talk about how to defend it in a second. But 70% passer, 3,700 yards plus this year, and he ranks up there as far as that 13-game pace. He'd be just behind B.J. Simmons, the all-time FBS leader in one 13-game stretch. He's not going to break that unless he averaged 700 yards his last few games, but that put the last 13 games in context with the type of season that he is having. It's not always the right players, but when you get the right players at the right time, okay, that's a big deal. But when you get the right players in the right time in the right system, bam, you have a potential Conference USA championship team like Western Kentucky's been playing, and they're a great team right now. They're playing as hot as anybody.
Yeah, and I mean, you mentioned that we probably shouldn't just dwell on one guy for the duration of the show, but it's pretty notable that I think, you talk about MVPs, that I don't think that there is a person that is more important to the success of their team in Conference USA at the very least than Bailey Zappe. He leads all FBS players in yards per game.
Mm-hmm.
If this was happening at a school maybe a little bit bigger than Western Kentucky, this guy would be getting his name in Heisman races because he's been that good. And that starts to make me kind of nervous after we watch Chris Reynolds, who's a good quarterback, but maybe not Bailey Zappe throw it around the yard caliber. And the receiving core, Charlotte was down to lost Victor Tucker midway through the game last week and still managed to find success. It's going to be challenging. And I think if we kind of flip over to the Rice defensive side and, kind of what we need to see, I think we can kind of draw a little bit from last week, because although the secondary, Mike Bloomgren called out Jordan Dunbar and said he had a great game. I want to echo that. I think the safety play, we need to see a little bit more from some of those young guys. But all of that circuitous way, talking too much to say, I thought the front seven played some of the best football they've played all season. 4 sacks, 8 tackles for a loss. If you're going to slow down Bailey Zappe, who hasn't thrown too many interceptions, you got to get him off his game. And that's going to be numero uno, most important for this week.
Yeah, get him off schedule and keep him off the field. You have to do a better job on third down defense. Owls did that for a lot of that game against Charlotte up until the last few minutes of that ball game, but make it really hard and play complementary football. On the other end, not to just take the steering wheel away from you, but when you look at the Owls offense, that ties in perfectly, because if you can run the ball, if Ari Broussard can have half the production and half the meaningful runs that he did against Charlotte that led up to them getting that lead down to the final minutes, that helps you tremendously. I know I'm not breaking any new football ground here, but if it's Broussard, if it's Griffin, a touch of Myers here, they've got to find a way. And we've gone, 14 minutes and 10 seconds or so without talking about Jake Constantine's role in this. Hey, he's pretty good too. He's shown a lot of bright spots. And if he can attack that Western Kentucky defense, dodge a few glancing blows from D'Angelo Malone, but that's how that all works together, as Matthew has gone spinning wheel again on us. Right when I was segueing and wrapping up my my point, at least we stopped talking about Bailey Zappe, though. That's one good positive in all this. Well, there you go. You got what you want, folks. The JP Show is back, taking your calls here. 787. There he is.
I give up, man. Somebody does not want me to talk Western Kentucky.
It's because we stopped talking about Bailey Zappe. You notice that's right when it happened.
That's the voodoo. He's got something going for him.
I'm sure you heard most of my eloquent response here, but essentially
Right.
complimentary football. And don't sell Jake Constantine short too. He's got a cannon, and you got to be the aggressor. You're not going to back down to them. Rice knows that if, like you said earlier, they make some contact, but if they take some time off the clock, you've got to put some points on the board too. Like, what was that? Yeah, yesterday we talked in the press conference. All these days are blending together with the different sports. But yeah, we did talk about yesterday in the presser. I think you brought it up that it might not be a 14-7 game. You've got to put some points up on the board yourself.
Yeah, I did bring it up because I was asking Bloomberg, how do you limit Zappy because you're not winning this game 14-7. I would be surprised if the winner of this game scores less than 40 points. To be honest, it might get wild given what we've seen so far, which I think is interesting. And this is something that I think kind of slid under the radar with the result last week. But in the game against Charlotte, that was Rice's most productive offensive game from a yardage standpoint against the non-FCS team in Bloomgren's tenure here at Rice. So put up almost 600 yards against Texas Southern. I think it was around 450 against Charlotte, and moved the ball well. And the key reason for that is Ari Broussard. Oh my goodness. The kind of the picture of the blue collar workman-like mentality, former walk-on, rises up, goes from running back to linebacker, back to running back, and ends up averaging, I think, 9.1 yards per game. If Rice has a game plan and doesn't want to make this a 45-41 game, it's Ari Broussard. And we've started to, I think, figure out an identity for this Rice offense. At this point, we can pretty much nail it down to the ball is going to go from Jake Constantine to Jake Bailey, Jordan Myers, or Ari Broussard. And as long as those four people are touching the ball on most every play, it feels to me, and I can get your thoughts on this, that Rice has an offensive setup that is starting to kind of, little engine that could chug up a mountain and kind of get rolling.
Yeah, and I think that continues with, even though it was staggered and broken up a bit with Jake Constantine, he had those 2.5 games coming in. I mean, I guess grand total 2 games when you figure you left early against UTSA and kind of came on third quarter in Austin. But to win this game, I think they have to get a little more and get that same connection, the Jake connection, and get back to August Pete and find some way to get him involved and to use as many weapons to sprinkle in like what Western Kentucky does best, getting it to a few different guys. You do that yourself too. So, and there's always the extra wrinkle. There's always something like, I didn't see that coming. I should have, but I didn't see that coming when you look back at any team you follow, really. But when you micro focus like we do on our great Rice scholars, that happens so much. Like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. But complimentary football and spread it out too on the Rice offensive side. I'm not saying he's going to have a $180, a $190 again, but you found a great running back in Ari Broussard. His production, he almost tripled his career high in running. He's not going to do that every game, okay, but you at least know that is in there, and it's about developing that consistency from here on out. 3 games to go, still plenty of time in the season to accomplish the goals, and spreading it out to other weapons and finding that main weapon between the tackles. They may have found the ladder there in Broussard.
And Broussard, and another part that I think is probably, the offensive line is always the unsung portion of any offense, except when it doesn't go so well. That's when we start talking about the offensive line typically. But I do want to give a shout out to the Rice O-line and what they did against Charlotte and kind of what I like in their matchup going forward against Western Kentucky. You had Javon Wolford missed the North Texas game, more or less. He played a couple jumbo snaps, but that was about it. You have a bunch of guys. You're getting Braden Nutter up to speed at center. It has not been kind of the cohesive 5 guys across the board that we were hoping for when we got into the season. But what we've seen last week in particular, and gives me kind of confidence going forward, is some cohesive unit, a cohesive unit that's blocking well and creating space in the running game, which I think is interesting because if we're looking at the Western Kentucky defense, you got to put your big circle around D'Angelo Malone, the defensive end that I believe he was all conference defensive player 2 years ago. He didn't get it last year. You probably could have made a very easy argument that he probably should have or could have. He's still that good. But regardless, if you can kind of have a game plan for what you're going to do with him, maybe Jager Bull is on the field and you put him in whatever tackle side he's on. Say you two deal with Malone, everybody else block for Ari. But is there anybody else? I know D'Angelo Malone is probably somebody that a lot of folks around Conference USA know. Anybody else on that front seven that kind of stuck out to you when you were kind of looking ahead at this unit?
Finally, a Matthew question that I was definitely ready for, that I don't have to think of on the fly. And that's a compliment to you from your great journalistic integrity. But Juwan Jones, hopefully I'm pronouncing the front, his first name. Juwan Jones on the other end, he was, I mean, you look at his bio, he is up there too. He's not as accomplished from the all league perspective, but he gets a lot of accolades too. So you've got those bookend defensive ends that can crash in. So that'll be a challenge depending on who is at right tackle, and we think it will be serving at left tackle again. But it's not just one guy. They're gonna help. As we know, the Owls employ that fullback system, so there'll be some relief in there. But definitely is Jones on the other side of that defensive line.
Yeah, and then right behind them, Will Ignat at linebacker has been a guy that I'm kind of interested to see how that goes, because I think what happened against Charlotte and what we've seen better when Rice is running the ball well is the ability to make a play on that second level and turn those 3-yard runs into 6 and 8 yard runs. And that's what our Broussard did so well last week. What is that next level of the defense, and how are they going to fare against Broussard? If he can kind of get into that level and feed some people as pads, as Bloomgren likes to say, things get interesting. But other than that, I think this is a secondary that has had its moments, but we saw Frank Harris lit this secondary up and throw all over the yard. And I think what we've seen from Jake Constantine so far, I feel pretty confident that if they need to go downfield, they can. But what's the right balance? And I don't know the answer to this question, so that's a tough one. But what's the right balance of letting Jake attack downfield and trying to limit the opportunities that Bailey Zappi has to beat you? That's going to be kind of a one to watch, I think.
You bring up two great things. First, on the immediate, you talked about with Jake. He's so good off schedule. We saw him. His percentage wasn't up to where he would want it, or I think the coaches would want it. He wasn't quite as accurate as he had been, but we saw him in all those other games. He was very accurate. He'd been very accurate. So they've got to get him into that rhythm. It does start with establishing that running game. And as you mentioned a few minutes ago, they had one of their better offensive games in the Mike Bloomgren era against Charlotte. They just unfortunately weren't able to pick up that 3rd and 6 or 3rd and 7 there around midfield when they could have prolonged the drive. And who knows if the outcome's different if they pick that one up. But you triggered something, and I didn't take my usual notes. I had to be away and do the Zoom with Coach Bloomgren yesterday, so I don't have the direct quote here. But you said something that made me remember what Cole Garcia said yesterday. Remember what he said when talking about Ari and how someone said to him, or maybe it was Ari himself, said, hey, someone said, hey, you got that 18-yard run for Ari. He said, no, I got him 3 or 4 yards. He got the rest, the 15 to 16 yards on those runs. He just runs with that straight line, green light mentality, the story of a few weeks ago, that he's kind of the Captain Green Light that's really led the charge on the team. But they talk about that 18 inches. Coach Bloomgren mentioned to me Monday night when we had a lengthier talk about Ari. So if you're interested in that, we podcast those shows. But give you a foot and a half, and Ari can run through that. He's just sly enough, and all the great running backs can bend their body, but he's got that burst along with that strength to be able to do this. I'm not throwing anything out there that he's going to break rushing records here, but he's got that unteachable ability to find that little crease when that crease is there.
Yeah, and I do have those quotes in front of me. I pulled them up, so I wanted it because they were Cole Garcia. He is good for a soundbite. I will tell you
great.
that. Yeah. But two things he said on Ari. He said if we just give him 6 inches of space, he's dragging 5 dudes for 8 yards. I like that one. And then another one he mentioned after Ari was trying to compliment the O-line for his big runs. Cole Garcia said, I might have gotten you 2 yards, Ari, but quote, I'm not the dude that runs through a safety's face every single time they fill the hole. That's kind of what it felt like. And that's what made it so fun. And man, the offense is just so much better when this team can run the ball. It just kind of felt balanced. And you saw this too. Rice put 5 wide on the field, nobody in the backfield several times against Charlotte. And we've seen it this season. So I think if maybe there were any frustrations about, maybe the ho-hum ground and pound, there have been credit Coach Dewey and Bloomgren in the offense getting a bit more creative and making things interesting.
Yeah, it comes down to a math game. You're the numbers guy. My dad was a math professor, so I was an English major, no doubt. Did not get into my bones, but when you can have your 5 guys beat their 6 guys, or your 5 guys beat their 4 guys, that's the numbers, and that's a lot of the scheme. What it comes down to, and Ari, he was very, very powerful in that game, but that doesn't mean anything. Once the opening kick comes on Saturday, you've got to prove it all over again. That's one of the great things about this sport. And as we mentioned, okay, wait, I'm checking our notes. We haven't mentioned Bailey Zappi's name in 12 minutes. No, but that's the remedy. That's why I think we know we camp down there a lot, because that's part of the remedy to be able to counter. This is kind of the 2015, 2016 spread era when it was at its height. That's how you counter that, to be able to take the time off the clock, hit them in the mouth, make them like it, and see where the chips fall. Have a break or two go your way and capitalize on the moment and have that green light mentality.
Yeah, and the only similarity that this game lacks between some of the bigger and more interesting upsets that Rice has had in the past, dozen or so games at this point, is this is home. So Rice gets the benefit of playing this tough task in front of their own fans at Rice Stadium. And we've talked ad nauseum about how inconsistent this team is, but how resilient they are, and they find ways to show up. So I couldn't tell you what's going to happen on Saturday, JP. Not if you, not for the life of me, but
Is this a preview show or what? Like, aren't we supposed to tell them? Don't give away.
Yeah,
the like we don't know.
This is exactly. Oh man, how do you think they build those pyramids in the desert? All those high rises, right? Somebody knows something. It's just not us.
Yeah,
it's Stonehenge. Yeah, I tell you what. Well, I have a go-do. I'm going to apparently go and to talk to my internet provider and tell them why they want to kick me off and
play them this video. Play them this.
Yeah,
video.
So I apologize for those missteps and everything going on with that. But the good news is we're full steam ahead everywhere else. So I do like to plug the Patreon every week and let y'all know what's going on. Practice notes. You can get a full length of quotes and stuff from Mike Bloomgren's press conference on Tuesday. And here, if you don't want to hear from us, you can hear from him, the boss man himself. That's your choice, and everything else going on. And then again, whenever I'm not at the games in person, JP, I turn on y'all guys on the radio and sync it up with and I'm not just saying this to be nice, but I mute whoever's talking on TV. And even if I like some of those guys, and go fire it up. But give me a hug. Yeah, there you go. This is my official recommendation
to
everybody. Did you see me?
I did. did.
Yeah,
Buffalo.
this is the recommendation, a plug for you. Go listen to JP and as he calls the game and keeps us informed.
My agent requires that. My agent also requires to you can get the behind the scenes tomfoolery of Nate and me and whoever decides to wander in that old broadcast booth on the Owls YouTube page and the Owls Facebook page. And if you're still here, the massive throng we have watching, the one of the best John Prine songs. You go to. I don't think I can play it, but I'm not really a huge music guy. But the song "Paradise" talks about Western Kentucky, Muhlenberg County, and all that. But I don't think Muhlenberg County isn't. I don't know if you're familiar with John Prine, but it's a great John Prine song. When I hear Western Kentucky, we don't play them a lot, and yeah, so hopefully still get to run across their paths with people parting conference ways, but can't wait for Saturday, my friend. Can't wait for Saturday.
Yeah, maybe, I guess just maybe one more time. Man, it could be in Western Kentucky with who knows? That conference realignment, things will change by the time next time we talk. I don't like we just show up for the game. So far, we've been ready to talk about the game that's happening 4 days from now. And so we're 9 for 9 on being able to talk about a game that happens, which I'm not taking for granted anymore at this point. So thank you for sticking with us, for bearing through my spotty connection as we kind of look ahead at the Rice Owls versus Bailey Zappi / Western Kentucky. But until then, we will see y'all next week. Rice fight
Never dies.